Hello! Welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I am your host as always, Professor Prime. So, math! Why math? Why do I like it? Why do I enjoy it so much? Why do I have this insane obsession and adoration for it? Well, you see, it's because math is awesome. And I guess that's probably a video, right? But we both know if you came across this video, you either saw in advance the time or you saw that when you clicked on it, right? And the thing is, there is more to it. And I hope to explain that and in a way that really grabs people while they're watching this, to explain why I enjoy this so much. So I think, to start, my background, that is key to me, my experiences with it. Because far too often, I've seen people have negative experiences with math, and that shapes how they interact with it. That shapes how they go forward with it. I know so many people that hate math, but after talking to them for a while, or after teaching them for a while, and talking about it in a different way, they hate it less. Some people even grow to like it, and that's amazing to me. And so, but let's back it up. So my background, right? I was lucky enough that I did have a natural inclination towards math, and that was fostered, that was allowed to grow. My mom, and I mentioned this in an earlier video, like I think my channel opening video, she saw that talent and she helped me expand with that. Um, Education is very important to my parents, and my mom, she didn't actually like math, and I didn't know that until I was a college student. And I would like talk about it incessantly, and she like, I gotta be honest with you, I'm not a fan. And she explained how things were when I was younger, because I'm like, I never would have guessed, right? Like she told me algebra at a young age, and the thing is, she went back and she looked at some things because she saw that I liked it, and she wanted to make sure I was ahead of the curve. Like, and there's a math joke in there, but I was lucky. So, with your parents, that's one thing, right? But then there's school, right? That's a big thing because you could have the most supportive parents in the world, and sometimes you get that negative experience in school, and that can kind of rock your world. It happens to the best of us. I've seen it time and time again. I was lucky enough to get good teachers for most of my classes, and elementary, middle, and high school. Now, occasionally I'd get someone who wasn't great, but I lucked out in the math department every time. It was a wild streak. And, teachers would see my abilities with it, and they would encourage me to, explain it to others. And they would encourage me to help. And in helping it, I got to talk about it more. I got to do it more. I got better exposure, and nothing helps you learn a subject better than teaching it. So helping others helped me, and that continued the journey. And I always was curious about like how this worked or how that worked, and there was a fun in it when I would solve a problem and I'd get something right. It was awesome, and when I get something wrong, it's like, well, how can I do better? And I always had fun with that. And when I was like 7, that was the first time that I played around the world. And for those who don't know, you would go around solving like math problems, and then if you couldn't solve in time, you would like lose. And I usually won those. But yeah, so that was pretty cool, and so I always had fun with it. And continuing this trend in discussing the background, it does make a huge difference. And what I've noticed about education, and I can't speak for everywhere in the world, I can't even speak for everywhere in the country that I'm in, which is the US or the state that I'm in. But I can say what I've seen from my personal experience and talking to others is this. A lot of the time when you're learning, when you're really young, they go out of their way to teach it in a fun way. They go out of their way to show you how it's used, right? It's very hands-on before you get to that abstract part. But then you get older and something changes, something shifts. It's more like, okay, so we gotta learn this thing, do this thing. And you're not always given an application. You're not always given an explanation for why this formula works. You're not necessarily building up the tools. I've said it in many videos, math is a language. You have to learn the vocabulary, you have to learn the syntax, you have to get how the mechanics of that language works, you have to know how to say things in different ways in that language, you gotta know how to communicate. And I don't feel like that's a thing that always gets focused on while you're learning math. And I think if it was, a lot of people would have a different story to tell. Now, keeping that in mind, I've had very positive experiences where I did have teachers that still tried to make it fun. And eventually that did stop, but it was already so ingrained in me from my own nature to the way I was raised. So for me, I always found some fun in it. But for a lot of people, I got why, they kind of changed their mind on it, or it just wasn't appealing. It's like, how am I going to use this? And we always focus on that. And it's like in many ways, like even if you're not using it directly, you're working on your problem solving skills, you're working on your reading comprehension skills, you're working that brain one way or another when you're doing a math problem. But it goes deeper than that, right? Like math is everywhere. It's the language that we speak about the universe in. And when I talk to people about math these days, I get a lot of similar responses to their experiences with it. And I came to the following conclusion, right? No one grows up wanting to hate math. If anything, people are like looking for a reason to like it or at least tolerate it more. And I feel like getting to that point is key in moving through school, but also in life. Overcoming an obstacle, I think, is an amazing thing to accomplish. And so while you're listening to that, right, a lot of what I said was my background, and that's part of the reason why I like math. And it's a big part. I had the chance to see how great it can be, but to go even deeper with that. So it's the language that we speak about the universe in. It's amazing when you get to problem solve because we like to think of math sometimes as this thing where it's just like straight to the point. There's no way that you can do it this other way, and that's objectively not true. Like with math, yeah, you might get to a point where yes, you want this correct answer, but there's so many different ways that you can approach that. And I've talked about that in some other videos, but I like the art in math. And I mean that in a couple different ways. So there's the idea that you can say things in this very specific way, but then you can really break it down. So one of the examples that I like to go to these days is if you're talking about pay. If I'm having a conversation with you and I'm talking about how much I get paid, I could say the following. Let's say I get paid $10. I could be like, oh, well, I get paid $10 an hour. And I am working 20 hours this week. And that means that I'm making 200 hours this week. So I just described a situation where I'm getting paid $10 an hour and I'm working 20 hours. And then it's like, well, what happens if I'm doing that for 50 hours? Like, I could figure that out. I can keep on going. And like, what am I doing in that process? I might not be writing it down, but chances are I'm either adding up those hours or I'm multiplying. But the idea is I could describe it verbally, and then when I'm figuring something else, I can approach it numerically. And I could do that in my head, which isn't great if you have to do stuff on a test. But I could also do that through a table. So I express things verbally through my words. I could express things numerically. I could do that through a table. I could show that in a lot of different ways too. And I could also make a graph from that table. Or I can, get an idea of how that might look if I was a linear path. And so I could express what I just said visually. But I could also do it algebraically. And that algebra, that's such a big thing in math, and that's what intrigues me because math is not just one thing, right? It's about communication, it's about representation, and that's the whole point of algebra. It is about representation. It's like, well, how do we want to talk about the universe? What can we say about it? And so we invent formulas, we invent these ways to talk about it, and then we get to take everything that we figured out and we can apply it to different situations. So in this situation, I could say that the amount that I'm getting paid is considered to be the dependent variable, and I can use y to represent that. And I can say that the amount of hours that I'm working is the independent variable, and I can say that x is the variable that will represent that. And I can say that $10 per hour is the rate of change, it's my slope. And so if I were to construct a formula based on that, I could say y equals 10x. And in this context, that allows me to see what I'm getting paid if I work a certain amount of hours. And now that I have that formula, I could also see that if I worked a certain amount of hours, I can deduce not only what I'm getting paid, but the other way around, right? Like I could be given what I'm getting paid and then see how many hours I worked. And of course, this isn't factoring taxes, but my whole point is like you could represent that situation, and you can do that with a lot of different things. And if you were factoring taxes, there's math with that, right? By its very nature. And then there's a bigger thing, right? So if I didn't know how to calculate my taxes that are getting taken out for a given situation, that model that I just constructed, that's still useful, right? I can still compare it. I know I'm going to get somewhere around that for whatever my x and y values are. I can get like that amount and say like, oh, well, this is going to be close to what I get. And that's a big thing in math too. Oftentimes the real world isn't nice, and so we create models that we know how they behave so we can compare the two. There's a lot of approximation done out there. But so the video is probably getting long, and I don't want to overdo it, but I'm hoping I've managed to capture people's attention to this point. So I do want to sum up things. I like math because in my background, I was allowed to explore how fun it is without that ever stopping. Because I do feel like a lot of us growing up, it was fun for us once, and then that changed. So I was put in a position where I got to see how great it could be. And part of that was just, no one stopped that fun, but also in teaching and tutoring, I was able to really explore that. And just through observation and all the stuff that I learned over the years and through teaching it, I got a better understanding of what it really is. I was always good at it, I always had a good idea, I always asked why, but I got to really get into the nitty gritty with it and see what math really is all about. And that art involved in problem solving is an amazing thing, but I mentioned earlier that was just one of two ways. The second way is sometimes it's literally art. Like if you Google fractals, like be prepared to be amazed because they're mathematical ways to explain something really cool, usually something that appears oftentimes in nature, something made between looking in different dimensions, like kind of made in between dimensions. Like I could have something that's between 2D and 3D, and maybe the shape produced is a fractal. That the pattern is really cool, and there's art that is made from that. And I'm oversimplifying fractal, but that's the major point. It's another way to express things out there, and it could be really beautiful. Math is everywhere, and I like that. It's how we speak about the universe. And that's amazing to me. And it's just fun. I like it. So I hope this was helpful in explaining why I enjoy math so much, and I hope that maybe it hit home with some people, and maybe they want to consider giving math another chance. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Professor Prime out.